Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the 148th Annual General Meeting of the Chartered Banker Institute. I can confirm that the quorum is present and the Annual General Meeting may proceed. We have nearly 100 people joining us online today, and the chat facility will be open for relevant questions on today's business. Due to the high number of attendees, it may not be possible to answer all questions today, but for those that we're unable to answer, we will follow up after the meeting. We'll now work our way through the agenda, which was published on the Institute's website. First item is to approve the minutes of the 147th Annual General Meeting. I propose that the minutes of the 147th Annual General Meeting, as printed in the autumn edition of the Chartered Banking Museum, be taken as read. Thank you. So that means we turn to what should have been my farewell speech, and it may still be my farewell speech depending upon how the vote goes 10 or 15 minutes time. However, in seeking a third year as your president, this reflected discussions that I had with my fellow trustees over the course of the last year on the increasingly active and important roles that the president and vice presidents play in helping the executive team consider the many opportunities that we have as an institute, and to work with the executive team on successfully implementing those strategic choices. These increasingly take a lot of time, from the day one investment through to the flow of revenue, and having greater continuity in both our non-executive and executive leadership is, we believe, as critical to our future success as it is to any small or medium-sized business, which is what the institute really is. We are thus intending to move to a 3-year term for the key office holders, subject to annual AGM approval. I think it's fair to say that the role of responsibility and commitment required by trustees is greater today than it has been at any point in our history, and likely to remain so. I would thus like to extend my thanks on behalf of the membership to my trustee colleagues for all their hard work over the year, not just as part of the formal governance structure, but in being there to support the executive team as and when needed. I'd also like today to pay tribute to some of our board trustees who are stepping down at this AGM. In particular, my Vice President, David May. David unfortunately can't be with us today, but he's been a tremendous and tireless ambassador for the Institute and has the ability to see challenges through many perspectives, and often ones that other people miss. We will miss David's positive spirit and his contribution and wise counsel at the board meetings. Next, I'd like to thank Ian Hardcastle, who also can't be with us today. He has worked with great commitment and energy on the Institute's learning and development agenda, which has recently included representing the Institute at the Asian Institute of Chartered Bankers graduation ceremony in Malaysia. Ian is continuing to support the institution's work both in the UK and overseas. And finally, I'd like to thank Stephen Pearson, who has worked with equal vigour on quality and standards. Thank you, David, Ian and Stephen, for your tremendous support, hard work and commitment to our institution and profession. I'd like to also thank our membership forum, which is chaired expertly by Helen Mackay, which is a true reflection of the 35,000 plus members we collectively are in the UK and abroad. Crucially, that forum provides speed analysis from our members, and to those of you here involved in the forum and to those watching online, thank you for your support. And thanks also to all our fellows and members who gave up their time, expertise and experience to support the Institute during the course of the last year. I'd also like to pay a special tribute to our most senior member of the Chartered Bank Institute, who is not only a fellow of the Institute, but the oldest living holder of the Victoria Cross, Flight Lieutenant John A. Cruikshank. John recently celebrated his 103rd birthday, and John, for those of you who were listening to last year's AGM, will remember when I spoke about him then, is a truly remarkable man. Second World War hero and a role model to all our members. John will soon be presented with a portrait of himself, which has been commissioned by the Institute and has been painted by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Hill. And we very much look forward to seeing his portrait sitting proudly in the National Portrait Gallery here in Edinburgh. John, as everyone who knows him will acknowledge, is a very modest man, so I know being painted wasn't the easiest thing for him. John, we have a huge respect for all that you have achieved, and this tribute is more than a fitting one. As we approach our 150th anniversary in 2025, the transformation we've seen in the Institute over the last decade demonstrates the scale and breadth of our work. For almost half of that 150 years, we have lived and worked through the great social, political, and economic changes that characterised the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We received our first Royal Charter in 1975, of which we are immensely proud, and began our journey from a very UK-centric professional body to a global setter of chartered status. We were saddened by Her Majesty's death, and as a mark of respect and gratitude for her long service, we closed our office in Edinburgh while Her Majesty lay in state. Our transformation has continued since then and accelerated in the last few years. We are now an international provider of professional quality education that can be delivered anywhere in the world at any time. And approximately 45% of our income now comes from outside the UK. We continue to develop a broader agenda of support for the new and emerging challenges that today's banking professionals must face. Notwithstanding many headwinds, economic and otherwise, this year has been a record one for the Institute, both in terms of revenue and achievements. Our work to develop a programme that recognises the challenges facing our ecosystem, together with our proven international reach, culminated in October last year with the launch of our Principles for Responsible Banking Academy, PRB Academy. This was born from a partnership with the United Nations Environmental Programme Finance Initiative and GIZ, who are based in Germany. The sheer scale of this project and its potential for influencing the responsible banking agenda globally makes this our most significant achievement in the last year, and arguably one of the most important milestones in our history. Our growing and increasingly diverse membership, currently standing at more than 35,000, is always at the forefront of our minds as we continue to build a broader global presence for the Institute. Our international partnerships, particularly those with AICB in Malaysia and Financial Services Institute of Australasia, continue. Our flagship annual banking conference helped to grow our impact, influence and profile, reaching 1,000-strong international audience from 31 different countries across 2 days. Recognising and rewarding emerging talent in banking remains an important element of our work, and we're delighted that we were able to hold the grand final of our Young Banker of the Year competition at an in-person event at the London's Mansion House, for the first time since the pandemic. Andrew Nielsen from NatWest was named the Young Banker of the Year, and Dee Cora from HSBC received the Audience Prize. Over the past year, the Institute has played its part in helping banks and bankers address the increasingly challenging geopolitical and economic situation impacting our customers and communities around the world. Throughout, we have supported our growing global membership with the knowledge, skills, and professional network needed to meet and overcome these challenges. As recent events have demonstrated, risk can never be regulated out of the system. Banking as a leveraged industry will always have a reliance on prudence, appropriate risk management, and making the right judgments. There is a need to balance preservation of capital and achieving a sustainable economic return for shareholders. Experience, training, and learning from each other alongside core banking skills and professionalism in areas such as credit risk and asset and liability management are all key to building a successful and sustainable bank. There is rightly an expectation that banks contribute positively to society, allowing deposits to remain safe without government support, while supporting business and employment and thus helping families prosper, creating the best possible foundations for the next generation. Neither the Institute nor regulators can prevent bank failures, but we can both help to minimise the probability of these failures. There have been many initiatives, political, legislative and regulatory, to make banking safer. Yet this year we have seen a number of banking failures, each idiosyncratic in nature, but the common theme was a failure to manage and indeed recognise the risks being taken with shareholder and depositor funds, maybe in the pursuit of profitability that would underpin investor sentiment and share prices that underpinned incentive schemes. The result being that shareholders saw their investments evaporate and governments had to step in to protect depositors. I suspect in hindsight, those shareholders may have preferred less risk for less return. Given the myriad of regulatory requirements around capital and liquidity, it is to some surprising that banks can still fail. The recent banking failures have a further common theme. When investors and depositors lose confidence, the fragility of leverage is exposed. when banks crash their capital and liquidity KPIs like a juggernaut out of control. Confidence and competence are correlated, but both can be undermined by culture. A culture that is short-term, overly focused on results with no eye on how those results are achieved, whether they are sustainable and what risks are being incurred and need to be managed or hedged, has been shown on many an occasion to end in a bad way. Whether it is the nature of investor expectations, a fear of failure, or unrealistic ambitions, a high-performance culture undoubtedly has many side effects that need careful management. Our role is not to interfere in the relationship between management and shareholders, or to pass opinions on individual strategies and outcomes, but to provide the framework, training, and support for bankers to understand and thus manage the many risks, products, and strategies that underpin the complex banking businesses that are integral to the success of any company. Regulation can play a part, but it is also a rather blunt tool unless it embraces the importance of professionalism and training. It is odd that unlike many other professions, qualifications and training in banking are optional, and some banks place relatively little value on them. It is equally disappointing that whilst we enjoy a good dialogue with both the Prudential Regulation Authority and the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, neither have openly advocated the journey to chartered status that the Institute offers. As we move forward, there remain many challenges in areas where the Institute can make a difference, provide thought leadership and structured qualifications that will improve the knowledge capacity of the industry. Perhaps too many. Many of these challenges are new and evolving. Climate, where we have played a lead role with the PRB. The use of artificial intelligence, which I believe will be a topic of great debate over and above the ability to relayer Harry Styles' vocals on songs by Lewis Capaldi. It's probably gone over the heads. Some of our mentions. Each of these areas come with difficult choices, and we can help bankers hopefully make the right choices by providing a structured framework to consider not just how to do X, but to appreciate why X is better than Y and what X will mean for their bank as well as society. The transition to net zero isn't just a challenge for banks, but for all of us in whatever country we happen to live in, and we all start in a different place. There is, however, little doubt that if we don't collectively correct our trajectory, that we will end up in the same unattractive place, where profitability of banks will be the least of our concerns. Facing into that challenge in terms of setting lending appetite in the context of the impact on the environment and then sticking to that appetite is not easy when others are perhaps not being as ethical and making money by being so. But greenwashing is just a shortcut to far worse outcomes. Our role is to provide a framework, insights, and support for banks so they can take the right steps on a better journey that will benefit us all. Similarly, the rapid deployment of new technologies, especially artificial intelligence, raises ethical dilemmas on data, privacy, and automated decision-making that need professional expertise and judgment to work through and ensure positive outcomes for customers and societies. Indeed, AI presents many challenges to us as an institute in terms of how we deliver content going forward. Professional bankers can and will need to play a key role in providing a trusted source of truth to separate AI-generated content from the facts. As we look to the future, the Institute needs to continue to adapt its approach, content, and distribution to remain relevant to our profession and society. The planned refresh of our core curriculum, the continued focus on raising standards through the attainment of chartered banker status, professionalism, and the development of the PRB Academy, alongside the evolution of our thought leadership agenda, with a particular focus on responsible banking, form the core of our plans for the coming year. Our progress, both this year and in the future, are underpinned by our investment choices and the hard work and commitment of the team that we have at the Institute, led by Simon, Joe, and Giles. And it would be remiss of me not to thank all of our staff for everything that they have achieved in the last 12 months. As members, we will be aware we took the decision to sell Drumshew House and to reinvest the proceeds in our digital transformation program. We have also transitioned to hybrid working, creating a better working environment for the team and offering our staff more flexibility in how they work. We placed part of the sale proceeds from Drumshew in our reserves to provide the capacity for significant investment where the payback flows over many years, creating a timing difference in our cash flows. Our new 5-year plan reflects the need to think about how we balance our income and expenditure over a longer period than 12-month accounting period. Albeit, as you would expect, we continue to target an appropriate balance between income and operating expenditure so that we can continue to provide the products and services that our membership require. The Chartered Banker Institute was created to help bankers set and maintain professional standards so that the industry can play a key role in supporting economic growth and do so responsibly. That may have been delivered somewhat differently by our predecessors, but the essence remains the same today, and it will be as we look to the next 150 years and beyond. So thank you, and we now move to the formal proceedings of the meeting. So turning to the formal part of the meeting, the resolutions to be put to members this evening appear in the notice of the meeting, which is published in accordance with our charter and rules. So we start with item 3, which is the submission of the annual report for 2022-23. The full annual report, together with our annual accounts, is available to members on the website. The annual report has been considered by the Audit and Risk Committee and our Board of Trustees and is recommended by the Board for adoption. If you have any questions on the report, please raise your hand if you're in the room or type them into the Zoom chat facility. Do we have any questions? Okay. In the absence of any questions, I now propose the adoption of the annual report and would ask those in favour to indicate their approval by voting accordingly using the Zoom voting facility, or online, and by show of hands. Confirm that the annual report for 2022-23 is adopted. We will now consider the accounts for the year to 28th of February 23 and our auditor's report from Shane and Tate. As I mentioned a moment ago, the accounts are available to members via the Institute's website. As with our annual report, the accounts have been considered by the Audit and Risk Committee and our Board of Trustees and are recommended by the Board for adoption. If you have any questions on the accounts or the auditor's report, please raise your hand in the room or type them into the Zoom chat. No questions. So I now propose the adoption of the accounts. Would ask those in favour to vote accordingly using the Zoom voting facility for online attendees and by a show of hands for those in the room. Thank you. I confirm that the accounts for the year to 28th February 2023 are adopted. Item 5 deals with the appointment of the auditor for 23-24. The Audit and Risk Committee and the Board of Trustees propose the reappointment of Shane and Tate as auditor, and I would ask those in favour to vote accordingly using the Zoom facility or by show of hands. Should be probably by show of hands as opposed to be. I confirm that Shane and Tate are reappointed as auditor for 23-24. We'll now deal with the appointment of role bearers for the Institute, and I'll ask Joe Murphy, Acting Chief Executive, to lead on the next item.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We consider the recommendations from the Institute's Nomination Committee on the extension of the current President's term of office until 2024 and to increase future President's tenure from 2024 onwards. As outlined in Steve's speech, this ensures continuity of strategy for the board's leadership and to support the Institute's executive team to deliver on our strategic purpose. The Nominations Committee also agreed to recommend that the President's tenure from 2024 onwards to be increased from 2 years to 3 years to align with the President's tenure with the tenure of trustees. Recommendation 1. Extension of the current President's term of office until June 2024. I will now ask those who support the extension of Steve Pateman's current President's term of office to June 2024 to vote accordingly using the Zoom voting facility online or by show of hands in the room. I confirm that Steve Pateman's term of office For me, I confirm that Steve Pittman's term of office as Institute President has been extended to June 2024. Recommendation 2, increase the tenure of the President's role from 2 to 3 years from 2024. The vote. I now ask those who support the increase in tenure from the President's role from 2 to 3 years from June 2024 to vote accordingly using Zoom for the online participants and by a show of hands for those in person. I confirm President's tenure has been increased from 2 to 3 years from June 2024. Thank you, Steve. I will now pass back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your confidence. It's hugely appreciated. Thank you. Okay, well, that takes me on to the Vice President's appointment and extension to term of office. So this item follows the theme of the previous one. So we will now consider the appointment of 2 new Vice Presidents to the Board of Trustees. They're already members of the Board of Trustees, but they become Vice Presidents. Those nominations have been considered and approved by the Nominations Committee, and these appointments are for an initial term of 1 year, but the intention would be to then align them with the 3-year term from the next AGM. So the nominations are for Paul Denton, FCBI, and for Catherine Brown. So I now ask those who support the appointment of Paul and Catherine as Vice Presidents until June 24 to vote accordingly using the Zoom voting facility for those online by show of hands for those people in the room. Congratulations, Paul and Catherine. I can confirm that you've both been appointed as Vice Presidents for until June 2024. Moving on to the second recommendation. The recommendation is to increase the Vice President tenure from 2 to 3 years from the next AGM in June 24. This recommendation is proposed by the Nominations Committee to align with the future tenure of the Presidents and also the rolling tenure of trustees. So I now ask those who support the increase to the Vice President tenure from 2 to 3 years from June 24 to vote accordingly using the Zoom facility, if online, by show of hands in the room. Thank you. Right, we now get around to the appointment of new members to the Board of Trustees. So we conducted an open selection process, as many of you will be aware. We received over 35 applications. We interviewed 20 individuals from that pool of 35, and we came to a conclusion as the Nomination Committee to recommend the following 5 individuals to membership as appointees to the Board of Trustees in line with the institution's rules. Biographies for each of these individuals can be found on the Institute's website. The nominations are Douglas Belmont to serve until 2026, Professor James Devlin until the same period, 26, Greg Jones until 26, Jill Hammond until 26, and John Last until 26. I would ask those who support the elections of Douglas Belmore, Professor James Devlin, Greg Jones, Jill Hammond, and John Last to the Board of Trustees until 2026 to vote accordingly using the Zoom voting facility for those online and by show of hands for those in the room. Thank you very much. I confirm that Douglas, James, Greg, Jill, and John are elected as members of the Board of Trustees for the term from 2023 until 2026. We look forward to seeing you at our next meeting in September. So we'll now consider the reappointment of the following trustees for a second term of office, which have been considered and are unanimously recommended by the Nominations Committee. There are 4 individuals who have all served their first term and have agreed to be put forward for a second term. They will serve until 2026, and the individuals are Anders Bovin, Ian Henderson, Billy McLeod, and Sue. I would now ask those who support the reappointment of Anders Bovin, Ian Henderson, Billy McLeod, and Sue Primer to the Board of Trustees to vote accordingly using the Zoom voting facility for those online and by show of hands for those in the room. Thank you. I confirm that Anders, Ian, Billy, and Sue are reappointed to the Board of Trustees for a second term from 2023 until 2026. I believe that brings us to the conclusion of today's business. But if there are any questions that any members would like to pose either in the room or online, Joe and I would be happy to answer them for you. Into the business of the 148th Annual General Meeting of the Chartered Banking Institute. I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself and my Vice Presidents and the rest of the Board of Trustees for taking the time to join us today, either in person or online. And we look forward to connecting with you all over the course of the next 12 months as we continue to create a global community of responsible bankers. And on that note, I will conclude the proceedings of the AGM for this year.